Good morning, everybody. And by that I mean friends and poetry writers and poetry readers and people who just like to listen to it. This is Jim Ransom back again this week with another Morning Jim program where we're going to read some interesting poems. There are so many good poems in print, as well as others, I'm sure, gestating all over the world, that there's never a shortage of material. I can hardly wait. But for today, we are going to read a congeries of verses. I'm going to start with one that I wanted to read last week, but I didn't get it in. And it's a humorous verse for children by Edward Lear, who was an Englishman in the mid-19th century and probably really started the kind of poetry, verses, let's call them, that appeal to children and that ended with the more sophisticated poetry of Ogden Nash. And we still have some people writing similar poems today, but not very many, unfortunately. I guess we have a very serious world to deal with. But this one by Edward Lear was first read to me and my brother many years ago by my Aunt Dorothy, and we called her Dotton because we couldn't pronounce, when we were little, we couldn't pronounce Dorothy. But the poem is entitled The Owl and the Pussycat. And here it is. The owl and the pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea-green boat. They took some honey and plenty of money wrapped up in a 5-pound note. The owl looked up to the stars above and sang to a small guitar. Oh, lovely pussy, oh, pussy, my love, what a beautiful pussy you are, you are, you are, what a beautiful pussy you are. Pussy said to the owl, You elegant fowl, how charmingly sweet you sing. Oh, let us be married. Too long have we tarried, but what shall we do for a ring? They sailed away for a year and a day to the land where the bong tree grows, and there in a wood a piggywig stood, with a ring at the end of his nose. His nose, with a ring at the end of his nose. Dear Pig, are you willing to sell for 1 shilling your ring? Said the piggy. I will. So they took it away and were married next day by the turkey, who lives on the hill. They dined on mince and slices of quince, and they ate with a runcible spoon. And hand in hand on the edge of the sand, they danced by the light of the moon. The moon, the moon. They danced by the light of the moon. Now that's a delightful poem that I have good memories about because of my Aunt Dorothy reading the poem to my brother and I. Edward Lear. I spoke last time a little bit about him. It was a very interesting history. His father was a stockbroker in London, but he found enough time to father 21 children, most of whom were born, but they either died early in life or within a year or two. And by the time Edward got to be about 12, his mother left. I guess the whole thing was just too much for her. But anyway, he had a sister who, when he was about 12 or whatever his age was 26 years old. And she was unmarried, and she took a great interest in Edward and educated him, taught him to play the piano, and taught him to read, and taught him French, and taught him everything any man in that era would need to know. And so Edward, who had already been writing poetry, went ahead and became quite famous for his funny poetry, and the rest of his poetry, nobody reads it anymore. So then, next, I have two poems by a prolific Scottish poet whose name is Kathleen Jamie. She's won many prizes in Scotland and in the UK in general for her work. And she has done a lot of traveling, mostly to Muslim countries, but also through the Highlands and so on in Scotland. But here's her many years in the Muslim world, where she traveled a lot, doesn't seem to have influenced the poems of hers that I've seen and read. She's written about her travels in prose, but she often reads her poems with a Scots dialect and says, "I like the feel of it and the texture in the mouth." I'll try to do that with the first of her poems, and forgive me if it's not to your liking. And the poem I'm going to read by Kathleen Jamie is called The Stags, and it memorializes a trip she took with a friend who was her guide to see the red deer that inhabit the Scottish Highlands. And I don't know whether any of you are familiar with the fact that the red deer is actually a close relative of the elk, and it's not really a deer, strictly speaking. So the poem is called The Stags. This is the multitude, the beasts you wanted to show me, drawing me upstream all morning, up through the wind-scoured heather to the hill crest. Below us in the next glen is the grave, calm brotherhood, descended out of winter, out of hunger, kneeling like the signatories of a covenant. Their weighty, antique-polished antlers rising above the vegetation like masts in a harbor or city spires. We lie close together, and though the wind whips away our man and woman smell, every stag face seems to look toward us, but not to us. We're held, and hold them in civil regard. I suspect you'd hope to impress me, to lift to my sight our shared country, lead me deeper into what you know. But loath to cause fear, you're already moving quietly away. Sure, I'll go with you, as I would now, almost anywhere. I think that's a very sweet poem, a well-written poem, and it's got the view of the red deer so perfectly expressed. They live in the glens of the Highlands, and they are regularly culled because the holding capacity of the land up there is not great. So, because of the game laws in Scotland and England, you can frequently order at a restaurant steaks from the red deer. But I'm not going to go there. The Stags by Kathleen Jamie. Now, I liked her poetry so much that I'm going to read another one that was published in Poetry Magazine 2 or 3 months ago as the poem of the day, and it's called Moon, also by Kathleen Jamie. Last night, when the moon slipped into my attic room as an oblong of light, I sensed she'd come to commiserate. It was August. She traveled with a small valise of darkness, and the first few stars returning to the northern sky, and my room, it seemed, had missed her. She pretended an interest in the bookcase, while other objects stirred as in a rock pool with unexpected life. Strings of beads in a green bowl gleamed. The paper-crowded desk, the books, too, appeared inclined to open and confess. Being sure the moon harbored some intention, I waited, watched for an age whose cool gaze shift, first toward a flower sketch pinned on the far wall, then glide down to recline along the pine wood floor before I'd had enough. Moon, I said, we're both scarred now. Are they quite beyond you? The simple words of love? Say them. You are not my mother. With my mother, I waited unto death. That's a moving poem. Once you get to the end of it, the moon has made its course through the room, and she begins to think of the death of her mother. They say that you can't write anymore a happy poem, that poems have to begin and end in agony. I don't quite agree with that, but I notice it in a lot of poems that get published. So maybe that's what the publishers want, agony. Anyway, that was Moon by Kathleen Jamie. So I'm going to end with a poem of my own. It's called Hegemon. And I think everybody that's listening to this program probably knows what a hegemon is, and that is a master of all that he or she surveys. And it is true that the United States has been the world's hegemon since World War II. We haven't liked it very well, but that's what we've been. And I have to say that we shouldn't fight that. We're far better off being the hegemon than having other candidates for that honor, if you want to call it that, being hegemons over us. So this is Hegemon. I wrote this over a year ago. And so here it is. He was it, alone and boss of all, who must in some sense answer to his call. He was it. He didn't know it then, but every word soft scribbled from his pen was made into a law. It just seemed easy. His theme, meet the press, then go get ice cream. Tonight we'll be truly merry on our way to get strawberry. What about the guns with bad teeth and black beards? It didn't take long for him to know he didn't want advice. He knew it was hard for him to tell the good from bad. his own whim was best, and came at a cheap price. Those beards with bad teeth and guns, I think from them I'd rather run, he said. The people never knew how stubborn he could be, until $1,000,000,000,000 was trashed away. And now this ice cream lover could see the price of ice cream doubled in a day. I hope you understand who that poem is about. But that's what we live in this day and age. We live in a lot of agony and a lot of humor and a lot of people with too much pride and not enough common sense. However, poetry is a completely different thing, and we don't have to get involved in politics to love poetry and to read poetry. And I've tried to, for the most part, stay away from politics in my poems and the ones I read. So I hope you enjoyed this, and if you didn't, let me know. Our reading today is over, and it'll be replaced by another reading in a week with all new different poems. And I want to show you, before we leave today, some wonderful